The globalists have been systematically engaging in a massive brainwashing campaign, telling the public that torture is a good idea. And now we've seen the aftermath of torture. The Joseph Mengele-style abuses include killing detainees and harvesting their organs. But they don't just torture people to death. They do things so horrible we can't even mention them here. And there's no mystery when it comes to finding out who ordered all of this ultra-brutal torture at Camp X-Ray at Guantanamo Bay and Gitmo and 32 other camps in Iraq. Alberto Gonzales and Chertoff and the rest of Bush's crew openly wrote memos detailing how torturing people unto death is an okay thing to do. It's part of the public record. The White House and Pentagon ordered the torture, but when they got caught, they just burned a few of their underlings. The Pentagon's own reports admit that 90% of those that were picked up at checkpoints in Iraq were totally innocent. But that didn't stop them from being tortured. In fact, the Army's own report admits that military dogs were used to bite and frighten detainees, that women were brutally raped, that detainees were beaten to death and sodomized with large objects dripping with battery acid. People's children were also raped in front of them to attain answers. This is the same type of mentality we see from serial killers, and it's riddled with all sorts of perverted sexual abuse. Is this what the land of the free and the home of the brave has become? After 13 years of sanctions, over 1.5 million Iraqis died, 700,000 of them children. And now thousands of private contractors have taken over the torture where the Pentagon left off, following in the footsteps of other famous control freak serial killers and torturers. The only reason the elite is selling us on torture is because they want to condition us to where we will accept its use against us. And it's been going on for decades in America, in the prisons, and against pro-life demonstrators, environmental activists, and anyone else that doesn't totally submit to their tyranny. The footage you're seeing is from the late 1980s and early 1990s, where the police openly pulled out nunchucks, started wrapping it around the arms of peaceful pro-life demonstrators and brutally breaking them, simply because they refused to get off the side of the sidewalk. The police thought it was their right to break people's arms because they didn't follow their orders.
They used nunchucks on the rescuers. This is an illegal martial arts weapon, and merely possessing one in California is a felony. To be attacked with one is assault with a deadly weapon. Never before in the history of America have nunchucks been used on non-violent protesters. This is the gruesome sight of what happened. The police, in unprovoked cruelty, wrapped the nunchucks around Michael Hausman's arm and broke it. When lawyers went to federal Judge Tashima to request he order the police to cease using them, he denied the request, saying in so many words that pro-lifers could not prove they were in any danger.
I can't tell you what it's like to be lying on the ground with police officers on top of you, using all sorts of torture holds to make you walk. You can't walk even if you wanted to walk, and their sole intent is to torture you, and then listening to the screams of the people.
When you bring out riot sticks, it's usually because you expect to see some serious opposition, so you put on helmets and you put on face masks and you carry shields. These policemen were bareheaded.
But here it was calculated torture, and the policemen were enjoying the pain. They laughed at the people screaming, and all of us screaming, all grown men, mature men. And you couldn't help but scream. What happened was when the two nightsticks squeezed on the wrist, they cut off the nerve ends and the flow of blood, and your hands swelled up to almost twice the size, and they turned black.
It didn't matter whether you were a woman, a man, an old person. It didn't matter what your age, sex is. anything, that they were just there. They were going to brutalize everybody. And I think probably to the women more particularly that they were very angry that they couldn't get a young woman like myself to walk. And I could tell that it was a pride issue.
This is an important illustration because it shows us how long this tyranny has been going on in this country. And if they can get away with it with one group, they can get away with it against everybody. The fact of the matter is the establishment and its enforcers have been setting the precedent for a long time to torture women in plain view of the public, to use illegal nunchucks and break people's arms. And now in Iraq, they have these big live TV shows with all the people confessing after they've been openly tortured. And in 2005, people they take into hospitals who refuse drug tests are restrained and then tasered repeatedly until they go ahead and urinate in a cup. And there are hundreds and hundreds of examples we don't even have time to cover here. The point is, this is all macabre and terrifying, and the New World Order is conditioning us to accept it. We must resist it. The United Nations was founded right here in the United States in 1945 at the end of World War II. It was set up at the Presidio in San Francisco by our military-industrial complex. The Rockefellers put up the money to build Rockefeller Center and to also give them the land for the United Nations. So this whole area is New World Order funded and controlled. And basically, it's a debating club to make the third world think that they have authority and to think that they're part of the power process. But really, the G8 or the G8 nations control the United Nations through the Security Council. We hear the reports all the time. They're in the news where some UN bureaucrat runs over somebody when they're drunk driving in New York or Washington, D.C., and nothing can happen to them. But it gets a lot worse than that. The United Nations has been caught hundreds of times running giant sex rings with kidnapped women and children out of Europe, Asia, Africa, the Middle East. It's a huge business. And right here in New York, they routinely catch these UN officials and even low-level bureaucrats with their own house slaves. Many times it'll be some UN delegate from Asia. He's got some kidnapped little girl from Russia. So these are the people in here telling you that world government's good and that they need to run your life. And you look at the UN's Charter and Declaration of Human Rights, it says you don't have any rights. It says the UN is the absolute arbiter and authority. And now we see our own government adopting the UN model of governance. The United Nations believes that private property should be in their hands, controlled by them. And when it comes to self-defense, back in 2000 at a UN meeting held here, their organization UNIDIR called for all civilian firearms to be confiscated. In fact, they stated that civilian ownership of firearms threatens the legitimate power monopoly of the state. Now, what's a power monopoly of the state? That's a dictatorship or martial law. And they strive to have governments have the monopoly of power over the people. Remember who was for gun control? Adolf Hitler, Joseph Stalin, Fidel Castro. In every case, if a government tries to disarm you, it's tyrannical. Black Americans couldn't own a gun. Native Americans had their firearms confiscated. Roman slaves 2,000 years ago couldn't own a sword or even a knife. Being disarmed is one of the key hallmarks of a society that's enslaved to its government. Sorry. A pile of fake signs meant to look like they were individually made. Getting slick here. Republicans do that too. See, this is a UN operation. This is a UN operation, so look how it's all meant to look like it's individuals. Imagine what would happen if these tens of thousands of people were truly informed about